Welcome to Expert English Academy. Learn English through interesting story. The Sleeping Beauty. Part 1. The computer controlling the derelict laboratory and its defenses was not actually mad. Leo Castanides patiently reminded herself of this fact yet again as the projections from her headset showed a surrealist fusion of security codes and bramble vines. It's not insane. It's merely under the mental control of one of the greatest electrokinetics to ever come out of a Genjin lab, or rather, to never leave that lab. Lifting her gloved hands, she tried prying two of the bramble vines apart. Once again, the vines writhed and sprouted wicked thorns, trying to scratch and pierce her electronic intrusion, cutting into her code. She reached again, but the protection protocols thickened under the instincts of the dreamer she had been hired to awaken. Beyond the three-dimensional projection overlaying her view of reality, she could see the defensive turrets of the lab's security lasers swiveling her way, and backed off physically as well as electronically. Which means I am completely outclassed. I'm only half the electrokinetic this guy was rumored to be, at my very best. Hiding behind the corner of her last secured safe point, Leo paused to take a drink from the flask at her hip. It contained water only, she never drank while she was on the job. Liquor dulled the wits and the reflexes, inevitably leading the drinker into greater peril. Just because the Raider clan hired me to free this man from his stasis prison doesn't mean I'm stupid enough to risk my life heedlessly. They're not paying me enough for that. Then again, she couldn't just drop this quest. Not everyone had her particular combination of talents. Leo was just barely good enough in reflexes and combat training to have qualified as a Minute Maid by her homeworld's strict standards. If she took on the normal sort of bodyguarding and one-man army mercenary contracts most Minutemen and Minute Maids took, she probably wouldn't survive long enough to go back home at the age of 35 and breed the next generation. Assuming she wanted to go back, which she didn't. What she was really good at were the old computer languages. Ancient tech fascinated her. It was a hobby she had turned into something of a career, raiding archaic tech sites on war-torn worlds and in abandoned space yards, places laced with unstable, deteriorating security measures and decay-worn traps. This, the Borgite Project, was the epitome of what she loved. Except this wasn't some moldering, 100-year-old piece of abandoned technology. This was a self-sufficient, still functioning piece of 100-year-old, lethally guarded research lab. Not all the Genjin research programs had ended when the original subjects of the genetic engineering project had rebelled against their captor creators centuries ago. Enough of the various projects had been segregated in isolated pockets on different worlds to ensure that some of these programs would continue for hundreds of years more. But as each of those projects was discovered, the Genjins targeted the research labs, freeing the captives wherever possible and inciting those inside to rebel if they couldn't be freed directly. It had caused a lot of tech to be crippled, abandoned, and lost, with the outer edges of the known galaxy locked in constant pockets of warfare. Only in the core worlds was there a long history of peace and stability, but in the core worlds, there weren't many Genjins living among the normal. Differences often meant unfamiliarities, and that led to fear and distrust. As much as even the normals deplored the Genjin projects, the average core citizen didn't go out of his or her way to help look for hidden, illegal genetic manipulations. Sometimes, the Genjins had spontaneously rebelled, and sometimes they had succeeded. The Borgite project was one such internal rebellion. The researchers' mistake had been to put one of their own creations in control of the security measures. Leo had already seen the evidence in the outer edges of the complex that it had been a fatal mistake for many. Shin Koda was the name of the man she was looking for, the man with the mind controlling this entire facility. According to the historical records from the escapees, he had wired himself fully into the facility's systems to ensure that his fellow Genjins could escape, but only at the cost of being trapped in the machinery. Some of the researchers and their security personnel had tried to converge on his integration chamber while the others escaped, only to be locked out of his particular lab. Others had tried to pursue the escaping victims of the Borgite project, or had tried to flee for their lives, only to be locked in. Only the Genjins had gotten out. Almost all of them save for Shen, and whoever might have died during the escape. A brave and honorable act on his part, but a damn foolish one, too. He shouldn't have acted until he had constructed a means of his own escape, too. Now he's stuck in this bizarre, programmed dreamscape, metaphors merged with machinery. Until I came along, no one had the right combination of talents to get even this far, and I'm not even halfway to rescuing him. She had some electrokinetic abilities as well as an affinity for old programming languages. Just not the strength of this man's mental might. Still, an analysis by the Raider clan had proven it would take a combination of physical and mental dexterity to breach Shin's defenses, and she was their best shot. Possibly the only one who could do it. Considering the pool of talents the Raider clan had at their command, it was something of a compliment. Maybe. She had the strength and the speed to dodge some of the physical traps, and the skills to avoid being destroyed by the independently patrolling robots, but even the best of Minute Maids couldn't dodge a dozen simultaneously firing lasers. If she tried to press forward, that was what she would have to face. Lasers which were far more than the original, rough tally cited by the escapees in their accounts of what the place had been like. Which left her with trying to get through the coded defenses, since the physical ones were able to thwart her. Psychic abilities were rare, though the Scions had been the first of the Genjins to successfully break free of their genetic breeding programs. Like many victims of the various projects, they had retreated to a fringe colony world of their choosing, and had kept to themselves. But some had been interbred with other project strains in the early days, in the hopes of broadening the gene pool of psychic abilities. Some of that interbreeding had included the Minuteman project. For that reason alone, Leo's services came with a very high fee, despite her comparatively mediocre physical skills as a Minute Maid. Half up front for trying, and half at the end for succeeding. Enough creds to buy myself a small planetoid if I want, plus the ultimate prize, political asylum. If I didn't trust the Raider clan's intentions toward all free-roaming Scions, I'd question why they'd be so willing to pay so much for this particular one. Checking her chrono, Leo synced up with the less sensitive lab systems, the ones that weren't as likely to kill her. Ears straining for any noise that might come from a patrolling sentry bot, she reviewed the list of places she could get into. Supplies lists, entertainment library, researcher personnel files, though not the files detailing the genetic experiments that were done. Not that I blame him for locking out any information on how he and the others were made. A glance around the corner showed the turrets still actively sweeping and the illusionary bramble vines still firmly in place. She eased back before they could flag her as an intruder, and wished she could just wave a truce flag at the security sensors built into the walls. Turrets and brambles and flags, oh my. Wait, turrets, pennons, brambles, entertainment files. She scrolled quickly through the file lists, checking the status of the lattermost. Yes. He's dreaming right now, and he's still connected to the security systems as well as the entertainment files. I'm seeing actual activity patterns, and recent ones at that. Now the only question is, can I hack into his dreams via those files? Oh, please, let it be so. It wasn't an overly complex system compared to modern entertainment programs, but it did include full stimuli programs. It also made sense that he would be using the files to keep his mind stimulated and occupied. He's probably living the ultimate fantasy life, plugged into these entertainment files like a Hollywood addict. He's not going to welcome me into his sanctum, unless…
Yes!
There it is. There's the holo program I want. He's trapped and he knows he's trapped, or he did know it at one point. The only way he's going to let me in is if I join in one of his virtual dreams and ride to his rescue like a legendary hero. All I have to do is program some suitable weaponry and armor out of this old code, borrowing from this story, and this one, integrated into this file over here, and lure him into playing it. And survive the occasional automated patrol, she added silently, hearing a faint hum approaching her position. Supply files, come to my rescue, yes. There. One of the doors in the hall slid quietly open. Moving near silently on soft padded slippers, Leo ducked into what had once been an office and tucked herself into the closet at the back. Shutting the door behind her, she settled cross-legged on the floor of the tiny space and continued her reprogramming. I'll need some helper programs, in case I get into trouble. I can't tie those directly into the security system, but I can program them to prompt Sleeping Beauty in there to give them access anyway, as a subplot of the storyline. Good, as I suspected, he does have a random selector program set up to offer him story suggestions from time to time. If this works, he'll be helping me to rescue him, without being the wiser. And I know he likes this file, he's accessed it several times over the decades, though I don't think he'll be expecting the role reversal I'm about to pull, let alone like it. Of course, if this doesn't work, I won't stay alive long enough to uncover his opinion on the matter. I'd better hurry, it looks like he's 3/4 of the way through the current accessed file. I'd hop into that one and try to contact him that way if I didn't think his personal security programs would fry me on the spot. Far safer to integrate myself into a dormant program before he accesses it, and just go along for the ride. Shin-Kota stared at his face in the mirror with just one thought running through his mind. I'm running out of time. The list of supplies needed to keep his sealed existence going was running dangerously low. He had 3 years' worth of nutrients in the dwindling storage bays. The power source that supplied energy to the research lab had maybe 5 years left. The suspension gel hosting his body that was down to just 2 years, maybe 3 if the recycling system didn't break down again. He didn't trust the backups. It didn't matter that he had another 700 years worth of regenerative medicines to keep his body young and fit. The aging of an adult human body could only be slowed by so much. Here in the administration hall, which was nothing more than a simulated projection, he had long ago programmed the system to display his body as it actually was. His short-cropped hair was salted with gray among the stark black, and there were more fine lines beginning to form around his eyes and mouth than he could recall from his last self-examination. As always, his legs, arms, and chest were banded with metal from the sensor probes. Visible reminder of his self-incarceration. His muscles were still in good condition, since his body did move at least. Somewhat in response to the scenarios playing through his mind, and the gel provided a decent amount of resistance, keeping his muscles reasonably strong. But while he still felt young enough, he looked middle-aged. Shin wasn't quite sure how many years had passed. He remembered giving up counting somewhere around 56 or 57. And how many bodies lie dead all around? You couldn't count them either. Turning away from the mirror, Shin snapped his fingers, summoning up the realm list. It hung in the air, a familiar holographic projection. He wanted something fantasy this time. Scrolling down through the hovering list, one of the file names caught his eye. It seemed different, maybe a little bolder in its colors. Not sure if he wanted to enact a fantasy romance right after living through a Western scenario, Shin continued down the list and found the same file name coming up again. That's odd. Maybe I just scrolled the wrong way. Again, the colors for the scenario's advertisement looked a little brighter and livelier than the rest. He stared at it, then shrugged. Why not? I've usually enjoyed this one, with its bit of swordplay and some decent lovemaking. But I'll opt for some extra random variability this time. I know all of these programs too well by now on their normal settings. Opening up the file, he flicked his hands, tapping hovering checkboxes and shifting holographic sliders almost randomly. Slapping the start lever, Shin watched as the marble and glass hallways of the administration hall swirled and dissolved. But instead of the green meadow he usually appeared in, he found himself standing in a castle bedchamber, the castle bedchamber, in the highest room of the tallest tower, where the sleeping princess usually lay. Frowning, Shin turned around, examining his surroundings. The fanciful canopied bed was over there, neatly made with crisp white sheets and a blue velvet coverlet. The chests of gowns and jewels sat neatly against the walls, which bore brightly woven tapestries, and in one of the window alcoves sat a spinning wheel, waiting for the princess to prick her finger upon it. Only he couldn't see the princess. A glance down at his body showed it neatly clothed in the ancient garments that went with this setting, a red and gold doublet and matching striped hose. Red leather slippers protected his feet, and his waist was girded with a gold belt. But he wasn't wearing armor, and he wasn't carrying a sword. Computer. How am I supposed to rescue the princess like this? What role am I playing? Even the voice of the computer was different, feminine instead of masculine. You are playing the role of the Sleeping Beauty. Your rescuer will enter gameplay once you prick your finger and lie upon the bed. And wait 100 years. No, thank you, Shin muttered. But at least this version is different. Computer, override any protocols which would automatically put me to sleep as the main character, Sleeping Beauty. Plus any protocols which would try to make me play out the 100 years of enchanted sleep in real time. I'm doing enough of that on my own. Acknowledged. Glancing at his fingers, he shrugged and crossed to the windowed alcove. Touching the distaff needle with the smallest of his fingers, he felt the mild sting. Virtually, he could see and feel the little bead of blood welling up, but he knew that nothing much had happened to his real body, other than that it had probably moved a bit in the pale blue.
Go!
Supporting him physically. One day, it might be interesting to feel real pain again, and I probably will when my supplies run out. Peering out the window, he saw nothing but the courtyard of the castle, some landscaped gardens, and trees in the distance. Time to lie upon the bed, I guess. It was a comfortable bed, at least. In previous versions, when he had been the prince, he had spent several enjoyable hours seducing and deflowering the real Sleeping Beauty. Stretching out on the velvet bedspread, Shin tucked his arms behind his head. Computer. Tell me when my rescuer has entered gameplay. Understood. Princess Leo has now entered the game. Do I have to stay on the bed while she fights her way to the castle? If he did, he would be utterly bored. I never really thought of how passive the female's role is in this particular scenario, and what kind of a name for a Princess Charming is Princess Leo, anyway? How far did I throw the normal scenario parameters out of whack, randomizing everything? Consulting. That was an odd thing for the computer to say. Shin frowned, but it didn't take long for the systems monitoring the entertainment matrix to speak again. You are permitted to move around within the royal suite. You may watch the action from the windows. When your rescuer is within 1 minute of arrival, you will be given a warning to return to the bed and assume the correct position for your role. You will not be released from your prison until you cooperate. That was a very odd thing for the computer to say. Rising from the bed, Shin crossed to the window. In the minute or so since pricking his finger and lying down, a massive wall of brambles had grown up between the castle walls and the forest beyond. He remembered previous versions of this game, the strain of his muscles as he hacked and hewed his way through the enchanted hedge, struggling with the cruel, barbed vines which magically slithered and regrew, attempting to thwart any entry. How good it felt to bash and slash, venting his frustrations with this self-chosen solitary existence. How odd it is that I'm now the Sleeping Beauty. How very realistic, too. Bzazap. The windows rattled with the force of the explosion. What the? A huge chunk of thorn-sprouting greenery was now missing, and the edges of the gaping hole were on fire. Bzazaboom. Another chunk vanished, this time along with a section of outer wall. The windows rattled again and Shin swayed with the force of the explosion. Staring, he watched the debris fall and the dust settle, revealing a strangely dressed woman. Instead of the armor and tabard of a medieval warrior, she was clad in black leather pants, matching vest, and a ruffled white shirt. Her hair had been pulled into a long blonde braid fastened with a black bow at her nape, and the top of her head bore an odd, triangular hat. In her left hand, she hefted a large canister of some kind, probably a power pack, and in her right, a cone-tipped cross between a small rifle and a handgun. With the stock of the mini rifle braced between elbow and ribs, she spun to the side and shot the nearest patch of regrowing, enchanted vines, disintegrating them before they could grab and tear into her flesh. Science fiction meets fantasy? What random parameters did I flip? As he watched, dumbfounded, she leaped with athletic grace over the rubbled remains of the courtyard wall. Once she was inside the castle boundaries, the brambles subsided as they were programmed to do. Dumbfounded, Shen watched her tuck the gun into a clip on the side of the canister and set it down. Stepping back, she snapped her fingers. Gun and energy canister dissolved, vanishing like a discarded game parameter. She then tilted her tricorn hat back, shading her eyes peering up the length of the castle. Though he couldn't see her eyes over the distance between them, Shen knew the moment she spotted him at the window. He knew it because she grinned and lifted her black-clad fist, thumb poking up an ancient greeting. Stunned, he stayed at the window as she walked up the steps and entered the castle. An interactive rescuer? This is your 1-minute warning. Please lie on the bed and close your eyes so that the next scene may progress. Bemused, Shen turned to do so. He caught sight of himself in the cheval mirror standing across the room and detoured abruptly. Up close, he could see the gray hairs stippled along his temples in his reflected image. Gray hairs he had seen just minutes before in the mirror in the administration hall's simulation. This isn't right. I shouldn't look like my real self. I always look young and handsome in these stories, not middle-aged and, well, like me. The computer spoke up. This is your 30-second warning. Please lie on the bed and close your eyes so that the next scene may progress. Computer, adjust my apparent physical age to about 27 years old. Consulting. Negative. Your appearance is to remain true to reality. Please lie on the bed and close your eyes so that the next scene may progress. What? Shen stared at his image, his brown eyes opened wide enough in shock that he could see their whites all the way around. Something is seriously wrong, a knock startled him further. As did the voice, feminine and unfamiliar, calling through the stout oak door. Hello in there. Could you please lie down on the bed and close your eyes, so I can come in? This door is not going to open until you do, you know. You think so? Computer, end program. Shen ordered. He didn't like the way this entertainment simulation was going. Consulting. What the? Computer, end program. Player 2 does not concur. Please lie on the bed and close your eyes so that the next scene may progress. Something was very wrong. Computer. Emergency override, code. F.G, number 3, execute. Shen tumbled backwards under the force of that feminine command before he could complete his own. He thumped onto the bed, arms and legs pulled out by the bonds that abruptly appeared. Before he could regain his breath, a leather strap wrapped around his mouth and a velvet sash covered his eyes, leaving him blindfolded and gagged. He knew this scenario, but not from this side of things. He didn't arrange for it often, and Shen knew he hadn't tapped anything remotely like this on the options panels, because he hadn't accessed the subfolders for kinky sex scenarios. Even as he tugged futilely at the bonds holding his now shirtless body to the bed, he heard the door open. "Thank you for your cooperation. I apologize for the forcefulness of my entry, but the circumstances have rendered it absolutely necessary. Come fuffer. Wa fe hef if goi om." Frustrated, Shin yanked at his bonds, but was unable to budge his arms more than a few centimeters. He tried spitting out the leather strap, but that didn't work either. The mattress on his left dipped. Fingers touched his face, making him flinch. They didn't harm him, just gently eased the blindfold up over his head. Greenish eyes and a warm smile met his furious glare. She wasn't the prettiest woman the entertainment simulations had ever generated for him, but she was reasonably good-looking for a blonde. "I'll remove the gag and the other bonds once you've calmed down. In the meantime, you have my word of honor that I don't intend to harm you." "Not that I could. This is only a simulation, after all," his rescuer-turned-captor offered wryly. "Allow me to introduce myself. Leo Castanides, Minute Maid and rescuer for hire." Wah! None of this was making sense. Not unless his program had been hacked. The last attempt of that, however, had been over. Shin didn't know, exactly, just that too many years had passed. "Who?" Hayu." "Hayu Ria." She frowned a little in concentration, then smoothed her expression and nodded, comprehending his question. "Yes, I'm very real. If you were to ask the computer how many people are playing in this simulation, it would tell you that there are 2 of us in here. Well, technically you're in the master control room and I'm hidden in a safe spot roughly halfway into the complex, because that's as close to you as I can physically get without getting killed by the defense mechanisms," the woman Leo added dryly. "But I'm very real, and very much interested in rescuing you. A real rescue, not a simulated one. I am here to unhook you from this forgotten machinery you've been protecting, pull you out of the suspension fluid you're floating in, and ensure you get physically back in touch with reality." Shin stared at her, trying to comprehend her words. Either I've gone mad, or the system is finally breaking down, or she really is real and here to rescue me, or she's here as a trick of the geneticists. That last one didn't ring very true. No one had tried to get at him for far too many years. Shin stared up at her, this youngish woman, confused. She leaned over him, and he felt her lips pressing gently against his forehead. That felt real. Very real. Only an actual kiss could have felt that good, or the simulated touch of another electrokinetic. A long, long time ago, he had interacted with others with similar gifts, geniuses at programming computers to do what they wanted because their minds could literally manipulate the electrons of the various programs. It had been so long, he had forgotten what it felt like. Leo blushed as she spoke, sitting upright again. "See? I'm not going to harm you." She has to be real, Shin thought, staring up at her. She has too many contradictions to be a stable program. The no-nonsense approach, the sudden kiss, unless she's a symptom of the system crashing, and if it is, I have to fix it, fast. If this program crashes while I'm in it. Let me give you a brief synopsis of the last 102 years. after you sealed yourself into. Closing his eyes, Shin concentrated and snapped his fingers, activating the inbuilt, wordless escape program. 3 short, 3 long, 3. F.G. Number 13, execute. Shin oofed as she dropped on top of him, wrapping her arms tightly around his ribs, while the bed and its bonds dissolved.